Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So, of course, this will be a video on the simul that I played this past Friday. So, this game is against our Chesco member, Sethey5. So let's get into the game. So, after my first move, Knight C3, not a very common move, but the goal is just to simply control the center. So after e6, e4, c6. Now if black plays d5 here, this is a French defense, because after d4, knight f6 is possible, bishop b4 is possible, e5, and then gets tricky, c5, queen g4 stuff. It's all in the mix. So our Chesco member played c6, basically setting up for what is basically called the triangle. So I played f4, the reason being I wanted to expand it this way, get the pawn out, get the bishop out this way. d5, knight f3, bishop d6, d3, using the bishop to protect the pawn, restoring balance. After knight e7, g3, castles, bishop g2, b6, castles, bishop b7. So this is all standard, pretty much. So white's goal is to expand on the king side, and black's goal is to sort of expand here in the center and also on the queen side. So it's another one of those double-edged positions where black is expanding on a different side than white wants to. So after queen e1, I sort of bring up the motive that I want to transfer my queen here. Now the other motive is pushing this pawn and also breaking through on the king side. Now, for one thing, I need to find out how to get this bishop in as well. But that is a very hard thing to do, right? So first of all, I need to get my pieces involved. Sethey5 now plays this move bishop b4. Now, here's the thought process, right? I'm going to play e5, and then this bishop is going to look clumsy. Now, to me, I'm not sure about bishop b4, because you already moved it here, but when you're coming here, it seems like the only purpose is to take this and then take this and sort of play c5. Now, that's an interesting idea. I wouldn't say it's the worst idea, but when it looks to me, I kind of feel like, there's something better for this bishop. And to me, I would play the move c5 here. Now, the reason is because we need to open up this line. It's not an intuitive thing, but let's say, for example, after e5, bishop c7, and I follow up with my plan g4, now you have more space to bring the knight out. Bring the knight out here, bring the knight out here, maybe start expanding on the queen side, but that should be the goal. And I kind of feel like, knowing that the queen side expansion should be the goal, this bishop b4 move, right? It feels a little bit like you're putting a hold to your plan just to eliminate what is an okay bishop for this knight. And it's not an easy thing to see, trust me. because sometimes I sort of doubt myself on these decisions, right? It's very important to decide what are the good pieces in a position and what are like the mediocre pieces in the position. And another thing to really take in mind when thinking about these positions is just what is the planning of the position, right? What is white going to do? What is black going to do? So it all comes down to piece placement, planning, in order to make these moves have some purpose. And that's really a hard part of the game, but the more experience you get, the more you'll likely learn how to develop an effective plan and one that has purpose and making moves that make progress in your position. So I wouldn't say this is a bad move per se. This is more or less a move that might be extra because I feel like it sort of interferes with this queen side expansion that black goes for. Although one might have not known that was the plan. I mean, it's very hard to determine what the plan is, but it's sort of um, where you can play for the board, right? White wants to play on this side, so black should find other ways than just playing on the same side. Surely it's okay to play on the same side, but I would suggest playing on the queen side in this position. So after a3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, d takes e4, d takes e4, c5. Now I like this. I don't think it's a bad position for black. Um, Surely white might have the two bishops. White might be able to occupy the file sooner, but at least black is getting the pieces out. So after rook e1 protects the pawn, knight bc6, now I throw in the move b4. And at first sight, you might wonder, okay, so I'm threatening the pawn, and what else am I doing? Here's my ultimate purpose: to get the bishop out, point it towards that diagonal. Definitely hard to see, but that's my purpose. So after a move like c takes b4, a takes b4, my goal is to push this pawn because I want control of this center square, right? I also want to bring the bishop out. And by bringing the bishop out, we set it on a really strong diagonal. So let's say, for example, a6, prevent this b5. I'm going to play bishop b2. And it is up to black to see this threat. So after something like f6, right, blocking the diagonal, I'm going to play queen b3. And I'm going to attack this other weak pawn that is no longer defended by a pawn on f7. So after queen c8, I'm going to put more pressure. I'm going to play bishop h3. And after something like knight d8, I could consider something like knight d4. Just put even more pressure. But those are suggestions, you know? So that's why this idea of bishop b2 is really strong, because it sort of provokes this guy to come up, then we handle a weak pawn. So by getting this bishop here, it sort of forces black to create a weakness. And by making weaknesses in your enemy's camp, you're more likely to find targets that you can gear toward your position to try to win. And sort of when you have a target, right, you have a plan, you want to achieve something, a target helps direct your plan even more. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So after something like c4, surely the computer says b5 is an interesting move, but I just play bishop b2 right away. Just go for it. Keep the threat of this pawn open. Our man Sethey5 misses it, and I checkmate. So, what can we learn from this game? Well, honestly, I think Sethey played it extremely well. And this I would consider a successful opening. However, when it got to the move, well, okay, let's see. I would say the first slip up is really this move, bishop b4. Now, it's hard to see. It's definitely hard to see, but it interferes with black's plan here. And to me, it's a very minor slip up, but even the small things can make a difference. So let's continue, and after b4 and bring this out, what does black do, right? You might think, okay, what does black do to prevent this? And the move I would recommend, which is nearly impossible to find, is the move knight d4, blockading the diagonal. And after something like bishop b2 to put more pressure here, let's just get in the other knight, just block it, block the diagonal. And after b takes c5, this is completely hard to see, but after b takes c5, queen takes c5, knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, just trade. And you might think, okay, I'm down a pawn, why should I trade? Well, in this case, this bishop is really strong. You don't want the queen moving back here, but it's sort of recognizing that white has too much tension in the position. And sometimes, even though there's too much tension, sometimes if there's too much pressure, trading is probably your best option. It's not intuitive, but I would suggest it. So, of course, you might think, okay, you said this was a successful opening, right? Well, I did, yes, but why, as a black player, you might ask, why am I already getting into trouble here? And I guess it's sort of delicate, right? I kind of feel like after queen takes c3, there was also not really much need to play pawn takes e4. The move c5 would have been much better. The reason? If I use the same idea, you can play d4, right? This pawn is flexible enough to support. So for example, if I play b4 here, you could even snatch off the pawn. Or you could play d4, right? If you play d4, and I play something like queen e1, you could play knight d7, and this bishop sort of has to take a move to really get out of his burrow. So, just some small suggestions, but creating this flexible wall is really important sometimes. And although I play b4 here, you could go about this so many ways. You could play knight up, right, which is probably also good to reinforce this pawn. You could get your knight here to prevent the diagonal from being open. So there are many ways to do it, but it's kind of hard to sort of foreshadow your opponent's plan. And I'll go into that in future videos as to how you might want to observe your opponent's play. You might want to look at it and what kind of moves you can make to make your chess game feel a little bit more productive. So thank you for listening. Hope you learned a lot, and I'll see you next time.